Greetings. I'd like to explore a premise with you that children who experience a traditional Waldorf education for grades K through 12 are at a potential deficit for using technology effectively in their post-secondary years. This comes from the idea that the Waldorf education model is predominantly technology free. There is occasional introduction of technology as students are in their upper high school grades, but by and large, the Waldorf education model is technology free. Now, I'd like to start this with a disclaimer that this is not a robustly supported dissertation of any kind. This is simply an overview of the Waldorf model, and it contains several assumptions. And the assumptions are as follows. Number one, that the proficient use of technology is becoming an essential skill for personal and professional success in our society. Assumption number two, students in grades K through 12 should be given chances to engage with technology in meaningful ways to build this proficiency. And assumption number three, students in technology-free traditional Waldorf education models may be at a deficit for this proficiency. Now, we're also assuming that those students in the Waldorf education system are not receiving any kind of supplemental instruction in the use of technology at home. Now, the essential question that this brings to my mind is, what role does learning to think and connect with the world play in learning to leverage technology tools to accomplish creative and technical tasks? Well, to address this question, we're going to need to do an overview of the educational models for traditional Waldorf and traditional public school systems. And then we're going to try and figure out what exactly is it that students need after high school. And from that, we can hopefully draw some kind of potential conclusion. So let's start by looking at the traditional Waldorf educational model. The goal of a Waldorf education is to cultivate a sense of wonder and to inspire children to view the world, even in its most basic form, as magnificent. It prompts each student to embrace life with enthusiasm, initiative, and purpose. And these goals are met through an education that is rich with meaningful sense experiences, classical academics, and artistic beauty taught in all subject matters. The Waldorf model views children in three phases of childhood: early childhood, middle childhood, and adolescence. And the entire curriculum is designed to be sensitive to what the child is experiencing and what the child is capable at each of those age ranges. For example, in grades 1 through 3, they tackle language arts, social studies, science, math, world languages, art, practical skills, drama, music, movement. But they do those through fairy tales, through celebrations, through nature walks, through knitting and handwork, through flute and song. And so they tackle these content areas in a way that addresses the students' sense of wonder and an artistic aesthetic, and it brings the student into a richer and deeper experience with those content areas. And as they advance through the grades, going all the way through high school, the content becomes more complex as the child becomes more capable. But they have this rich foundation of a sense-based experience with their math and their science and their writing. And it's one of the few places where cursive is actually still taught and not being wiped out from our society. Now, let's take a look at the traditional public education model. And we don't want to diverge into discussion about all the different types of elementary curriculums and programs and the things that will potentially bog down a public education model. What we want to look at is what we kind of can all agree on to be true. And that is that by and large, teachers in our public education system try desperately to incorporate authentic learning, the creative process, and collaboration as they work with our students through grades K-12. But what we can also agree on is that, unfortunately, much of our instructional day in the public education system is spent on skills that can be measured with standardized assessments. And that doesn't often leave a lot of time for teachers to address students as beings of sense and as members of a world community. And so many of those goals to incorporate those richer, deeper experiences just don't come to fruition because of the very nature of the system and what's required of teachers in our public education system. Now, on the flip side, there is often an effort to incorporate exposure to the technical skills that we think will benefit students in their post-secondary endeavors. And you've got checklists that go through grades K through 12 where students get exposed to typing, the use of a mouse, interacting with icons, using the internet to conduct searches, using programs to manipulate video and audio. And so there are a variety of things that teachers try to incorporate through K-12 that give students a chance to interact with the technical aspects of technology and try to build some comfort level, some proficiency with being able to use that technology to accomplish tasks. What that does is it brings us to the big question. After students graduate from high school, let's take a look at what we think they would need as a general set of skills regardless of their post-secondary endeavor. So whether or not they're going to college, military, trade school, joining the workforce, etc. It doesn't matter what the particular post-secondary endeavor is. Let's just take a look at the fact that technology becomes essential to making meaningful and measurable progress in our society. And so what would that particular set of technology skills look like? Well, if we go through a variety of ed tech resources, things that are put out by colleges and departments of education, they tend to agree on some basics, right? That students should be able to type. They should be able to use a mouse. They should be able to do and conduct internet searches. They should be competent with Office suite skills. They should be self-directed learners of new technology. They should be comfortable with social media. There should be some netiquette, ethical use of technology. There should be some awareness about security and safety and how to keep one's digital self safe. There should be some hardware basics and troubleshooting ability, right? Have you turned it off and on again? There should be an awareness about backing up data. And there should be an ability to evaluate and find apps and software that are needed to accomplish a task. Now, in addition to these technical skills using technology, I think it's also important to point out that there are some necessary conceptual skills. For example, content evaluation escaped most of the technology lists that I encountered from colleges and ed tech resources because they were focused on the technical and not necessarily the conceptual. And so a student's ability to evaluate authenticity and the purpose behind a piece of information, that's huge, right? We don't want students being tricked by fake news. We don't want students being susceptible to large corporations and advertising. We want them to be able to critically think, evaluate, and analyze information and make proper assessments about its authenticity and its purpose. Now, for this, I'm kind of referring to the work that Daniel Pink has done, and his what he has coined the conceptual age. He feels that there are 6 senses that will lead someone to have success in their professional and their personal lives. And I am not an expert on these, so we're just going to go through them quickly. The first one is design. He feels that it's important for people to have a fresh and unique artistic approach so that they know how to appeal to the aesthetic senses of others. He talks about story, valuing a quality narrative and development of character and story over just the presentation of isolated and even disparate facts. We as a society appreciate story, the power of story. Symphony. This is being able to make connections and see the big picture. How do these ideas relate not only to me but to the world, and how do we as a society engage and interact with what we are experiencing? Empathy, being able to understand and connect with other people. That's huge. Looking at someone and being able to appreciate their ideas, their value, and being able to make a connection. Play, right? This is essential for the health of the human mind, the human body. And as an American society, we by and large disregard the importance of play. Just look at the incredibly low amount of vacation time that we have as adults compared to other countries, and our lack of ability to appreciate other cultures because we don't take time to travel, to play, to explore. We get stuck in our little routines, our little hamster balls. And then meaning, right? As our society is moving forward, we've left behind the need to just survive from one day to the next, and now we're looking at our lives saying, how do we make it full? How do we give it purpose? What is our meaning? And we look at those spiritual and more transcendental ideas as we can contemplate meaning in our lives. Now, if we combine this overview of the educational models and what goes into our students that graduate from the Waldorf model and our students that graduate from the public education model, and we look at what we think that they're going to need for their post-secondary endeavors, the sets of skills, right, both technical and conceptual, well, we can potentially make a conclusion here. We can potentially make a conclusion that a Waldorf student may actually be better suited to leverage technology to make positive impacts in our society. And interestingly, Daniel Pink was interviewed about the education system and how he feels it prepares students for, his six senses. And he, on his own, is a broad supporter of the Waldorf model because of how it addresses the student's need in light of his six senses model and what he feels students would need based on his concept of a conceptual age. And so it's fascinating to look at some of the quotes from Daniel Pink in relationship to the Waldorf education and its ability to prepare students to use technology in our technology-driven society to become these innovators of positive change who can experience that professional and personal success using technology because of their robust set of conceptual skills that they were given through their K-12 career. So let me close with this, a reminder and an anecdote. First, I want to remind you of my disclaimer that this is not a research-based presentation. No official research was done as far as, no official studies were utilized to support any of these claims. This is an entirely a subjective and cursory presentation with knowledge that we can basically all agree on about the educational models, what we think students would need, and what we've all kind of experienced. So this is just a summary of that information with a potential conclusion drawn from it. Okay, so I want to remind you of that. Now, the anecdote. I graduated high school in 1996 from a small farm town in Ohio. I never even saw a computer until I got to college, and I didn't even use the internet until after I had graduated from college. But as a new teacher, I was very interested in all the new technology that was popping up in schools, and I instantly began leveraging software and hardware to have my students complete projects. And I was incorporating things like graphic design, video, photography, audio editing, and then gradually social media as we began to do podcasts and websites, and there became avenues to share student content with a larger audience. Now, I taught myself about these new tools, and I spent hours figuring out how this worked and how that worked and getting comfortable integrating that technology into my lessons because I was very purposeful. I wasn't going to integrate technology into my lessons unless I knew that it was going to maximize student motivation and student achievement based on the educational goals that I had for them. I never used technology as frosting, as glitter. It was an essential component of our educational goals. So let me just go ahead and flash forward 10 years. And here's what's happened. I have recently been stupefied by my students' large deficit at using the technologies that they've grown up with, right? Assuming that these are students of the digital era, these are digital natives, and they've grown up with this technology, so they should know how to use it just naturally, right? But what I find is that I have students who don't know how to email. They don't know how to use the tools in a word processor, and they definitely haven't shown an ability to innovate. But they sure can spend hours playing a video game or taking pictures of themselves to share online. Now, how do I reconcile those experiences with all the books and articles that tout this generation of digital natives as people with rewired brains and an innate technology skill set that will help them become forces of change in this digital era? I can't. I think this generation has excelled as consumers, and that the percentage of students with the ability to innovate and create positive change is actually much lower than most of us are willing to admit. And I think this is largely due to the constraints set on students throughout their public education system. I think that the students who are genuinely positioned to leverage all of this new technology, who have a higher percentage chance of being those innovators using this technology for positive change, both professionally and personally, are students who have been encouraged to look at the world richly, deeply. Students who have been encouraged to contemplate their place in the world. Students like our Waldorf students.